Hello and welcome to this module where we are discussing tracking. So after we've finished planning, the next thing is to now execute and track our project. We start to track the moment that work starts on a project. Tracking involves recording the actual values. We want to record who did what, when did they do it, and what was the cost. Then the program, MS Project, will now start calculating the actuals and what is the remaining cost. Tracking of actuals is essential to properly managing a project. So the project manager must know how well the team is performing and when to take corrective action. So like in any situation, you cannot correct anything unless you have got information on what is happening on the ground. So that is the purpose of recording the actuals, because they actually tell us what is it that is happening on the project. By tracking project performance and comparing it with the original plan as saved in the baseline, you are able to answer questions such as, are tasks starting and finishing as planned? And if not, what will be the impact on the project finish date? We also want to see, are resources spending more or less time than planned to complete tasks? Are higher than anticipated task costs driving up the overall cost of the project? When planning similar projects in the future, will you be able to determine how good you and your team's estimating skills were in prior projects? So the actual information that we enter in our project is going to help us compare with the plan in the baseline. So the extent to which the two are similar determines our planning skills and our estimating skills. If you see there's a huge difference between what was planned in the baseline and what actually happened in the project, then you will know that your estimates were not that good. There are different ways of tracking progress inside MS Project depending on the level of detail or control that is required by you, your project sponsor, and other stakeholders. We are going to be looking at 4 main ways of tracking in MS Project. The first one is called record project work as scheduled. This works best if everything in the project occurs exactly as planned. So it's like you are simply coming and ticking and saying the task has completed according to schedule. So that's why it's called record project work as scheduled. The second method is called record each task's percentage of completion. So in other words, you have to go to each individual task and then you write the percentage of completion. You could either write any percentage. If you are very good, you can say it's 13% or it's 17%, but it's usually good to use some preset increments like 0, 25, 50, 75, and 100%. Then the third method is for recording actual start and finish dates and actual remaining work and duration values for each task or assignment. So in this case, we are not recording percentages, but we are recording actual values of the start date, finish date, the remaining work, and the duration values. then project will now calculate the percentages. Then lastly, we can track assignment level work by time period. So this is the most detailed level of tracking, where you need to record the actual work values per day, per week, or any other interval. So we are going to be looking at these in detail, and then we will actually use them to update our plan. Because different portions of a project may have different tracking needs, you might need to apply a combination of these approaches within a single plan. You might want to track the high-risk tasks more than the low-risk tasks. So in other words, we cannot use just one method for the whole project, because some tasks, they don't require a lot of accuracy in reporting, while others, they require precision in their reporting. So the first method, we said it is called track a plan as scheduled. The simplest approach to tracking progress is to report that the actual work is proceeding exactly as planned. For example, if the first week of a 5-week project has elapsed and all its tasks have started and finished as scheduled, you can quickly record this in the update project dialog box, right? So we are going to be looking at this update project dialog box. So you can simply indicate that this first week was completed according to plan. When you record progress on tasks, MS Project displays that progress by drawing progress bars within the Gantt bars for those tasks. So if you go to the Gantt chart, you now see inside the bar for a task, a thinner progress bar will now start emerging, and it will move until it fills the whole bar if that task is completed. We said another method is to enter the task's completion percentage. When you enter a completion percentage that is greater than 0, MS Project sets the task's actual start date to match the scheduled start date. The program then calculates the actual duration, the remaining duration, the actual cost, remaining cost, and other values based on the percentage you entered. So what we are calling the actual duration, that is the time that has been spent on the task so far. So if the task was for 2 days and you have spent 1 day and you record 50%, then MS Project will now say the actual duration is 1 day and the remaining duration is 1 day as well. So the cost will now also be calculated, actual costs and remaining costs. There are a number of ways in which you can actually enter this completion percentage. So the first way is to use what is called an increment button. So in the schedule group on the taskbar, so if you go up to the taskbar, then you look for the schedule group, you will find there is an increment button that you can use to simply increase from 0%, 25%, 50%, and so forth. Alternatively, you can go into a task view and add the percentage complete column to a table. Alternatively, you can take any task-centric view, say for example the Gantt chart view. You have got a table on the left hand side. On that table, you can add the percentage complete column. Earlier on, I discussed how you can add new columns when we're looking at the resources column. So you can also add the column for percentage complete. So these column names, they are already there on the options. So all you do is just click a button that says add a column, then a long list comes, and this percentage complete is one of those options that you can pick. Then you have a column that actually says percentage complete. So in that case, right there on the Gantt chart view, you can type in manually 25% complete, 50% complete. There's also what we call the task information dialog box. Remember, I was saying to you, you can always go to the task information dialog box by double clicking on the task when you are in the Gantt chart view. So when you double click on a task, it opens that task information dialog box. So inside there, you can also enter the percentage progress. And then alternatively, we can use the mouse to set the progress on the Gantt chart bars. So in other words, you can actually go inside the Gantt chart bar and drag the mouse inside that bar and move the bar to whichever percentage completion you want to set. So we are going to be looking at these various methods when we go back to our plan. The most detailed method is by actually entering actual values for the tasks. In this way, we are recording what actually happened for each task in the plan. For example, if we have got a task which was scheduled for 5 days, which is equivalent to 40 hours of work, and then we come to update it with actuals, we enter the actual duration as 3 days. In other words, we've completed 3 days out of the 5 days. MS Project will now calculate the actual work to be 24 hours. Why? Because 3 days times 8 hours per day will give you the 24 hours. And the percentage complete, it will be calculated as 60%, which is the 3 days divided by the 5 days. That gives us a 60% completion. Then it will also determine that the remaining duration is 2 days and the remaining work is 16 hours, because the total work must be 40 and we have completed 24 hours up to now. When we enter the actual values, the program uses the following rules to update the plan. So when you enter the actual start date, MS Project will now move the scheduled start date to match the actual start date. So if we had said on our plan that the project is starting on the 1st of November, then we come and record the actual start date as the 2nd of November. The program now shifts on the plan the start date from 1st to the 2nd. So this is why we were saying we need the baseline so that it keeps the original plan, because the moment we start putting the actuals, the program will start shifting the planned date so that it matches with the actual start date. In the same way, when you enter the task's actual finish date, MS Project will now move the scheduled finish date to match the actual finish date. and then it will set the completion percentage to 100%. Next, when you enter the actual work value, project recalculates the remaining work on the task, if any. Just like in the previous example, we said we have worked for 3 days, so it calculates that the actual work is 24 hours, and then it also calculates what is the remaining work, which was 16 hours in our example. You can also enter the actual duration, and if you enter that actual duration, which is less than the scheduled duration, then project will calculate the remaining duration. So going back to our example, the scheduled duration was 5 days, but we entered the actual duration as 3 days, which is less than the scheduled. So what it does is it calculates the difference between the 3 and the 5, and then it makes that 2 days as the remaining duration. But when you enter an actual duration which is equal to the scheduled duration, in other words, we have a schedule of 5 days and we enter 5 days as the actual duration, the program now sets the task to be 100% complete, because we have entered an actual duration that is the same as the planned task duration. However, if we enter a duration which is longer than the scheduled duration, in other words, we scheduled the task to be for 5 days, but we now come and we say it took 6 days. So the actual is now longer than the scheduled duration. What MS Project will do is it will now adjust the schedule so that the duration matches the actual. So it will now change that 5, which was in our original plan, and makes it 6, therefore matching the actual duration. Once it matches the actual to the plan, it then sets the completion percentage to 100%. After you have finished updating your plan, more often than not, it will be different from your original plan. But whatever you saved as a baseline will always remain static, because it is just a snapshot. It is not changed or affected by the actual values that we enter. In MS Project, there are various ways in which we can enter the actual values. We can use what we call the tracking table, and this one works well when you want to update the actuals and see the remaining durations and cost values in the same table, right? So that's your tracking table. It's similar to the tables that we were seeing when we're analyzing the cost of assigned resources. Remember the resource utilization table, the one that was showing the planned cost, the actual cost, the variance, etc. So it is similar to the tracking table because it will show you the planned start date, actual start date, planned finish date, actual finish date, and then with the differences. We can also record the actual values in the update tasks dialog box, right? So there's a dialog box where you can go to record the progress on a single task. So it does not allow you to update more than 1. It's simply updating a single task. When we are updating within the update tasks dialog box, if you enter a percentage complete, it doesn't automatically update the other values. It works more the same as in that resource assignment dialog box where we were entering the quantities and then there's a unit price. It does not update while you are still in that box. You have to close, then as it is closing and saving, it updates the new values. So you can see the new value when you reopen that dialog box again. So I'll just say a few points about evaluating our progress status. Because when we are reporting progress on a project, sometimes our definition of progress might actually differ. So for many tasks, it is difficult to evaluate a completion percentage. Take, for example, designing. So these are tasks which are not producing any physical output, so you can't actually measure how far you have gone. You can't say I'm 10% finished with my design. Then the time that is elapsed on the task does not necessarily equal the amount of work which has been accomplished. It means that if you have got a task that goes on for 5 days, if you finish 1 day, it doesn't necessarily mean you have done 25% of the work, because there are certain tasks that are very light at the beginning, then during the last 2 days it's very heavy because of the nature of the task. Also, the resources that are assigned to a task, they can actually have different criteria of what constitutes completion, which is different from what the manager defines as a completion percentage. So if you ask, for example, the bricklayer, can you tell me roughly what is the percent completion on the wall? To him, he might just look at the height of the wall and say, okay, if the wall is 2 meters and I'm at 1 meter, then I'm at 50%. But the manager knows that the first 1 meter is very fast, but the second 1 meter is slow, because now you are starting to fit the door frames, you are starting to fit the window frames, you are starting to fit the air conditioning ducts on top, and so forth. So there might be that difference, that variation between an understanding of completion between the resources that are reporting the progress and the definition of the project manager. So having well documented and well communicated task completion criteria should help to prevent downstream surprises. So in other words, if you can document properly and train the people so that they actually understand how to measure completion on the various tasks, then you are going to have uniformity in the way that each team member is reporting. And then lastly, you discover that the large and complex projects, they are always going to vary from the baseline. So you should expect to have larger variances as you get larger and larger projects. So we are now going to go to our project plan, and we are going to start entering actual values on our project.